Welcome to The Explainer, where we break down complex topics using the source material itself. Today, we're digging into how one of the world's most beautiful cities became the poster child for one of its worst housing crises. Right here, this is the blueprint for Vancouver's housing catastrophe. It's a plan that was sold to the world as a vision for a perfect, livable city. But as we're about to see, what it really delivered was a whole lot of public pain for a whole lot of private gain. So that's the big question, right? How on earth did a plan for a perfect city end up creating so much pain? We're going to unpack the massive paradox of Vancouverism, a celebrated design philosophy that built a stunningly beautiful city where the very people who make it run can't even afford to live anymore. To really get to the bottom of this paradox, we have to start by understanding the model at its heart. So what exactly is Vancouverism? Well, the term really took off after the city's huge transformation for Expo 86. The world saw these sleek glass towers, the beautiful seawalls, those protected mountain views, and everyone hailed it as the absolute future of city living. But behind that gorgeous facade is a pretty brutal reality. A median home in Vancouver costs $1.2 million. The median household income, just over $100,000. That means it takes almost 12 years of a family's entire income before taxes, before food, before anything, just to buy a home. It's one of the worst ratios on the planet. This, right here, is the paradox in stark numbers. So how did this happen? How did a model praised for its livability create such an unbelievable affordability disaster? Well, here's the thing. It turns out this crisis wasn't an accident. The sources argue it was a feature that was baked right into the design from the very beginning. You know, this warning isn't new. Decades ago, the legendary urbanist Jane Jacobs gave us this almost prophetic warning. She cautioned against the exact kind of top-down, luxury-first development that Vancouver would go on to champion. Her work gives us a really powerful lens to see what went wrong. And this slide, wow, it's pretty damning. It shows a systematic dismantling of everything Jacobs said a healthy city needs. Where she said you need old buildings for cheap rent, Vancouver just cleared them out for new towers. Where she argued for lots of small, diverse owners, Vancouver handed the keys to a few giant developers. It wasn't just a different strategy. It was a total rejection of the very things that keep a city affordable for everyone. And this gets to the absolute core of the problem. For decades, the city actively suppressed what's called missing middle housing. You know, duplexes, townhouses, small apartment buildings, that kind of stuff that's naturally more affordable. So why? Why would they do that? Simple. The city got addicted to the massive fees that only giant luxury tower projects could pay. They essentially traded away long-term affordability for a quick hit of cash. And this set off a vicious cycle. The city only approves luxury towers, so land prices shoot through the roof to match those potential profits. And then, all of a sudden, building a simple, affordable duplex on that same land becomes financially impossible. The result? A monoculture of expensive condos locking in the affordability crisis for an entire generation. So this one single design flaw, it spiraled out. It ended up creating two parallel crises. And it's not just about a place to live. It's about the very soul of the city getting hollowed out from two different directions. First, you have the residential eviction. That 11.8 times ratio, it's not just a statistic. It represents working-class families, young people, nurses, teachers, all being priced out of the city they help keep running. It's a quiet, slow-motion displacement. And look, this was a policy choice. This was not inevitable. Just look at a city like Vienna. They treat housing like a public utility, building up a massive stock of social housing for their citizens. Vancouver, on the other hand, treated housing like a stock market commodity and relied on a trickle-down approach that just completely failed the working class. The second eviction is a lot quieter, but it's just as devastating. It's happening to the small, independent businesses, the coffee shops, the bookstores, the places that give a city its character. And it's thanks to a predatory lease system that has become the norm. The weapon here is something called a triple net lease, and it's brutal. Basically, it shifts all the financial risk from the property owner onto the small business owner. A sudden spike in property taxes? That's your problem. The roof starts leaking and needs a major repair? You're paying for it. It's a system that feels perfectly designed to crush independent businesses. Okay, so that brings us right up to today. And you might be thinking, surely they've learned from all this, right? Well, a very recent policy shows how the same dynamic of prioritizing private gain over public well-being is still very much alive and kicking. So, not long ago, Mayor Ken Sim's government introduced what they called a zero means zero policy. The big promise was a 0% property tax hike for 2026, and it was sold as this crucial measure to help struggling people with affordability. But you always have to read the fine print. 0% sounds fantastic, doesn't it? But that zero comes after cumulative hikes of over 22% in just the 3 years right before it. It's not a cut, it's just hitting the pause button after a massive climb. And here's where the public pain part comes in. Critics are calling this a shell game. To pay for this tax freeze, the city is gutting $120 million from core services. And get this, that includes cuts to the very planning department you'd need to actually fix this housing mess. It's a tiny bit of relief for some, a huge break for wealthy property owners, and it's all paid for by starving public services. It's the classic playbook. So when you put it all together, the analysis from the sources is, well, it's pretty stark. The conclusion is that the unaffordability isn't some unfortunate side effect of a good model that went a little wrong. The model is the problem. The beautiful parks and perfect balconies were basically paid for by a system that was designed, from the start, to push out the working and middle class. So if the celebrated model is actually the disease, then what does a real cure look like? The sources point towards places like Vienna, cities that decided to treat housing as essential public infrastructure, not as a commodity to be bought and sold. And it leaves us with a fundamental question that we should really be asking of all our cities. Who are they actually for? Are they just products to be sold off to the highest bidder, or are they homes for the people who bring them to life?